welcome to Fox Soul's Black Report, your daily source for Black news, views, and opinions. Happy Monday. Today is October 3rd, and I'm Mimi Brown.
I'm Demi Lobo, and on today's report, representation for Black women has reached a very much so new level with the introduction of Ketanji Brown Jackson to the U.S. Supreme Court. We'll talk about the ceremony that took place over the weekend, as well as when she officially begins her new position. Meanwhile, a landmark new law in California plans to remove racial bias that can exist when rappers present evidence in a case. What group will be affected the most by this? We have the story. Then, an investigation is underway after a Phoenix officer shot and killed a Somali man with a history of mental health issues. We're going to break that story down more for you soulmates. Then, Keke Palmer opening the door herself with a new platform for content creators and new chilling details on the moments before PNB Rock lost his life at a restaurant in Los Angeles. Soulmates, we have all of that and so much more. This is our voice and our truth, so let's talk about it.
Good evening, and thanks for joining us today. We start with news on Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson's historic debut to the U.S. Supreme Court. Today, as this new session kicks off, Judge Jackson officially begins her new role. Now, over the weekend, the Supreme Court held a ceremony to formally welcome Judge Jackson to the nation's highest court. Jackson is the first Black woman to ever serve on the Supreme Court. She was sworn in at the end of June. In a private ceremony over the weekend, she took another oath led by Chief Justice John Roberts. The two then walked down the steps of the Supreme Court and posed for a picture. President Biden and Vice President Harris attended the ceremony. Jackson's arrival at the Supreme Court comes a day after the 55th anniversary of Thurgood Marshall, the day he made history as the nation's first African-American justice. It is such a great day. Justice Jackson takes her seat today as the newest justice and the first Black woman ever on the Supreme Court. We cannot say that enough. So today they'll hear oral arguments in the first of its type of case. It's Sackett versus Environmental Protection Agency. It will determine whether the Clean Water Act will apply to the wetlands. Today, for the Supreme Court, is also the first day that the general public will be let back inside since the pandemic hit. So there's a couple of things also happening for the Supreme Court that is going to be making news over the next, I would say, 6 months, including tomorrow. There is affirmative action case, which we'll probably talk about here tomorrow. Election law, which has been, all the rage, because of what we saw with the 2020 election. There is no date for that yet, but that's also another case that they have on their docket. And voting rights. The affirmative action is at the end of the month. Voting rights is tomorrow. So they'll be talking about that tomorrow. So there's a bunch of bigger cases that are coming that we'll get to see Judge Jackson put her stamp on. And so that should be very interesting.
Yes, Mimi, I actually wanted to read a couple of the others that they're going to tackle as well after elections, voting rights, as well as affirmative action. Like you said, they're also going to talk about clean water. And as we have talked a lot about what's going on with Mississippi, with Jackson, Mississippi, as well as other cities that we've seen cases of the similar for environmental racism that we've seen. I'm hoping that that's something that's tackled. Also, immigration. We've seen a lot of different cases about immigration. Just want to read a couple of the others. LGBTQ plus rights, something that we also cannot talk enough about in the world, and so many others that are on here, the art world. And this is very, very important. I was really wondering to see what was going to be the first plan of action. What was the first thing that we wanted to talk about the most when she got into office? And when we always see a Black person, we always think like, okay, finally someone's going to tackle those issues that are important to us. And so I'm very curious to see what's going to be her spin on her flair, what's going to be her voice on all of these topics, hearing from a Black woman in this position. So again, like you said, a legendary day, and looking forward to seeing how it all happens.
Absolutely. It is a legendary day. I think, as much as we want to see her leave her mark, and she will with her dissent statements and the things that she says during the cases. But what we have to remember is that the court is still majority conservative. And so a lot of the rulings that make him come down, we may not all agree with them because of how the court is stacked. But nevertheless, we're not going to let that take her shine. And the fact that she is there and representation means everything. And so we're excited.
Absolutely. That's a great point. That we're not going to get everything that we want. We're going to hopefully, like I said, I want to just see how she's able to sprinkle on some black girl magic, but it's not going to be cookie cutter exactly how we wish that it would be.
Yeah.
For sure. The National Archives confirmed it still doesn't have all the documents belonging to the government from the Trump administration. FBI agents executed a search warrant to retrieve thousands of records from Trump's Florida estate last month. The search warrant followed the National Archives' request for the former president to surrender all government documents in his possession. On Friday, the National Archives informed the U.S. House of Oversight Committee about those missing records. It claims that certain unnamed White House officials used personal email and messaging accounts to conduct official business. And when we get down to emails, we, there was a big scandal about Hillary Clinton and her emails. Now here we are, full circle moment here, that Trump and his administration were using personal emails, flushed things down the toilet. The list goes on and on and on, that it just seems like we're living in a surreal world, like a cartoon, for example, because if this was, she was crucified for those emails. She lost every opportunity to become president. And here we are, Donald Trump, even the fact that he's teasing the opportunity that he would go back and be president again in 2014. How is this real life that we're living right now when we get down to those in this position using personal emails to send classified documents that should have been on the record for the White House?
Right. Not only should have been on the record, that he should have not even had in his personal possession at his Florida estate. Right. So we know that they seized a whole bunch of documents, and the fact that they still don't have all the documents in their possession is still a problem. And so the National Archives, the Record Administration, they're deciding on right now if they should even consult with the Justice Department to initiate action to recover the records that were unlawfully removed. So there's still this pull and tug, this bigger conversation of how do we get these records back. We know that there's a special master has been appointed. There's a lawsuit. There's a lot of things happening. But even with that going on, Trump still doesn't feel like he has to turn over all the documents that are missing. And so it just almost becomes like, what's the next step? What do they do? How do they? Because this is a big deal. This is like a matter of national security. So how do they get these documents back in their possession to where they need to be?
Also, too, it's a matter of, does the White House know exactly what they're missing? That's the other question, because it's thousands of records. We're not talking about a couple of records here, a couple of manila envelopes that have a couple of documents. We're talking about thousands of pages, thousands of documents. Two questions here. What is it that Trump staffers and Trump are not willing to give back? What is in those records? And also, does the White House know what they're even looking for? Because it could be a few pages that are missing. We don't know exactly what's missing. And that's where it gets kind of scary, because what is it that we don't have in our possession that could be used against us in later days or months?
And I think that's what the Trump people are hoping, is that they won't recognize that some things are missing. But the fact that the National Archives are saying, we can tell something is still missing. So they're hoping if we take a page here, if we do this with this one, maybe they won't notice. But clearly they notice.
I love that. I love that.
And more than half of Americans in a new poll say they are worried the midterm elections will result in government gridlock. An Axios poll released over the weekend found 53% were concerned about the potential for a divided government and gridlock after the November election. The poll defines divided government as divided control of Congress, with one party holding the House and the other holding the Senate. For Democrats, whose party controls both the chambers of Congress, this is a slightly more pressing concern. 64% of Democrats say they are worried about divided government and gridlock, compared to 51% of Republicans and 44% of independents.
California is cracking down on the theft of catalytic converters. Governor Gavin Newsom has signed 2 bills into law aimed at making them less of a target of thieves. One will require recyclers to include in their written records the year, make, and model of the vehicle from which a catalytic converter was removed. Recyclers will also be required to have a copy of the title of the vehicle. The other bill will prohibit people from buying a used catalytic converter from anyone other than certain specified sellers.
And California is officially the first state in the country restricting the use of rap lyrics in trials. A new law limits prosecutors' ability to use rap lyrics as evidence against an artist. Now, lawmakers say this bill will help protect mostly black rap artists by eliminating any racial bias that may exist when presenting evidence. A judge will have to determine if rap lyrics are relevant to the case in a pre-trial hearing. The bill is supported by music industry and civil rights advocates. Demi, I know we've talked about this before, but for me, this is a win. This is a really good thing. In 1996, Calvin Brodus, we know him as Snoop Dogg. Okay. He went on trial, and it was a huge thing back then. And at the time, he had a hit single called "Deep Cover," and one of the lyrics in that song said, "'Cause it's a 187 on an undercover cop." Now, prosecutors used that lyric against him, but at the end of the day, in reality, the song was recorded for the soundtrack for Deep Cover, which, if you remember the movie, I don't know, soulmates, if you've seen the movie itself was about an undercover officer who was going undercover to bust up some drug cartel. Okay. And so the soundtrack of the movie was about going undercover, 187 on a cop. So basically, he did what they asked for in the soundtrack, but they were able to use those lyrics against him in court. So the fact that that was even able to be done back then, and now we're fast forward 2022, we're saying, okay, let's put some context on this. And what ways are we using these lyrics? Does it apply to this case? We can't just open a blanket door and allow to cherry pick different lyrics and decide we're going to use this or we're not going to use that. So it's estimated that more than 500 cases over the past 30 years have had prosecutors have used rap lyrics to convict people of color, black and brown people. And so this is a historic signing. Once again, California leading the way. There was a bunch of rappers on virtual Zoom with Governor Gavin Newsom. I think we have that picture. I think there was E40 was there, Ty Dolla $ign, Too Short.
Meek Mill.
They said Sweetie was on there too. Yeah. I mean, there was just a lot of rappers who were on there to celebrate this historic signing of the bill into law. Yeah,
like you said, Meek Mill was there, Too Short. Why? I mean, it was a slew of rap artists that were there joining him. And that's honestly, somebody online over the weekend posted this story on the Instagram story, and they said, you know what, Governor Gavin Newsom just be doing whatever he wants. And I thought that was so funny because we've talked about so many other bills that he signed into law. He really is for the people. I think that ever since that recall happened on him, and he knew that black people, have I not been consistent? After the recall with Governor Gavin Newsom, he said, you know what, the black and brown community has really looked out for me. So anytime I have the opportunity to do something great for the black and brown community, I'm going to do that. And this is amazing. Like you said, this is going to help so many black artists, but also I'm looking at now, what about we have people in jail? This RICO was totally different. That's Georgia, but Gunna and Young Thug, but like so many artists that have been victimized by something like this, are they going to get a chance to get any reprieve? Are they going to be able to go back and, right some of the wrongs that were done to those who could be serving jail time right now or serve jail time for something that was misconstrued? So I love that Governor Gavin Newsom is doing this, but I want to make sure that an equal playing field is for everyone that's been a victim to this.
Yeah, and hopefully this is a case study so other states will pick this up and implement this into law too. I mean, just one more thing too with this. There was a study done at the University of California, Irvine, and there were two different groups of people. They divided them. They gave the same lyrics to each group. One group they told was rap lyrics. The other group they told were country music lyrics. The group that they told were rap lyrics, they thought that they were offensive and they were in need of regulation. The other group that they thought it was country music lyrics, they loved them and thought it was a great idea. So that just goes to show you, when you immediately hear rap, you think of some sort of condemnation or something.
Yes.
And so they were saying that racial stereotypes play into when people hear rap lyrics, no matter what. So they took all this into consideration when they were signing this bill and acting it, and I'm so glad that they passed it. And so, it's just something to think about, right? Because we're vilified. It's just, if you think it's country, you're fine. If you think it's rap, then all of a sudden there's something wrong with it.
You know, maybe this just doesn't take away from the fact that if you do something wrong, don't put it in your lyrics too. We can't just, waltz over that. But however, I really wonder how Gunn and Young Thug and the other people that could potentially go down with their whole Rico case. How do they feel right now behind bars? And they've been there for a long time, haven't had an opportunity to be in court and defend themselves. And now you have Governor Gavin Newsom, why bringing in this bill, making sure that no one in California has to go through something like that. I just wonder, with them being behind bars currently from exactly this, how do they feel right now? I just feel like it would make me feel kind of like, I don't know. I wouldn't feel too well.
I would assume it would give them some hope.
Okay.
If another state is implementing this, maybe, it'll catch on. That's what I would
Okay. Well, we shall see. We shall see. A federal judge is upholding Georgia's election laws in a ruling issued over the weekend. Now, it's a blow to far-right action, the voting rights group founded by Stacey Abrams, who is also the Democratic state's gubernatorial nominee. Abrams' group filed a lawsuit against Georgia's Secretary of State soon after her 2018 election defeat, arguing that Georgia's absentee ballot policies represented gross mismanagement of the state's election system and violates Georgia's voters' constitutional rights. The absentee ballot policies require an exact match for names and addresses between voters' ID and voter registration records. A federal judge upheld that policy and ruled in favor of the state. Georgia's exact match system placed 50,000 Georgia voter registration on hold before 2020 election. Now, Abrams' group argued that the law was racially discriminatory because 70% of those who registered were suspended, and though they were also of black descent.
And rescue teams in Florida continue to search for survivors of the powerful Hurricane Ian. One of the hardest hit areas is Fort Myers. That's where experts are calling ground zero. The latest damage indicates Hurricane Ian may become the most expensive storm in Florida's history. The death toll related from the storm has grown to at least 47 in Florida, 4 in North Carolina, and 3 in Cuba. We're told the most people died from drowning and others died in the aftermath.
3 former Philadelphia area cops are being charged with killing a young girl when they fired 25 shots at a moving car. Brian Devani, Devon Smith, and Sean Dolan are charged with 12 criminal counts of manslaughter and reckless endangerment in the death of 8-year-old Fanta Biladi. Now, that happened in 2021. Prosecutors say the ex-Sharon Hill officer shot at a moving car as a crowd was standing outside of a stadium. Now, ballistic tests could not tell which gun fired the bullet that killed the child. And this story, still to this day, so extremely sad to know, to be so young and to lose your life in this way. The responsibility of police officers, when you shoot a gun, you don't know what it's going to puncture, where that gun is going to go. You can only determine where you shoot it at. And so for 25 bullets to land inside of a car and to kill this young lady, this is the only way, is for those cops to be charged. The only way for the family to be able to even rest a little bit in their city and walk around with pride for their city is for all of the cops, regardless of who the person was that shot it or where. They all need to be behind bars.
Yeah, I mean, you know what? This was extremely sad. So this all happened. They were leaving a high school football game when a shooting erupted between 2 teens. The officers immediately started shooting into a car they thought the shooting came from. Keyword, they thought the shooting came from, right? It was the wrong car. And so they ended up killing this little girl. Her family was struck as well. They did not die. Four bystanders were also struck with bullets. She was the only one who lost her life. And so the teens who started the fight, they were initially charged with her murder, but a grand jury later determined the officer should be tried for her murder, should be charged for her murder. So they dropped the charges against the teens. And so here we are with these 3 officers, because I think when you have that badge and you have that shield and you have that gun, as you said, Demi, it is very important where you point your gun. It's very important that you just don't point into a moving crowd. If there's shots fired coming from the crowd, I think the most important thing is to disperse the crowd in a calm way and help people figure out where to go, not return fire in a crowded crowd of people after a high school game. And so because they did that, this little girl lost her life. And so these officers definitely need to stand trial for her murder, because this little girl lost her life, and it shouldn't have went down that way.
Absolutely.
So. All right, soulmates, an investigation is underway after a Phoenix officer shot and killed a Somali man with a history of mental health issues. Officers say the man was throwing rocks at their car. Ali Osman died Saturday evening. Police say that 2 patrol cars driven by the officers were traveling through an intersection when unknown objects were thrown at their vehicles. Now, one of the officers got out of the car and discovered a man throwing rocks at their patrol car. The officer asked the man to stop, but Osman, whose family says he has a history of mental problems, refused. According to the attorney, Kwesi Smith, a bystander's camera captured a person claiming to have experience in crisis intervention, offering to speak with Osman and defuse the situation, but the officers shot him, and as he reportedly tried to pick up another rock. This is heartbreaking. This is a situation where someone was clearly having a mental breakdown. Officers showed no patience. Kwesi Smith is also a former police officer, and he said that these were rocks, not boulders. These were rocks, again. He said that he would equate the rocks to something his 4-year-old child would pick up and throw, right? And so the man's family says that he has a history of mental health issues, and so I'm not sure, we don't have all the details of what kind of mental health issues he has. They said that he was having an episode, he was throwing rocks. I just think that picking up a gun and then shooting a man who's throwing rocks is just not the answer.
Absolutely.
At all. It should have never even got there.
In no way, form. Mimi, you touched on all of it. This is just something that should not have happened. And for a family, another family that we have to talk about now, mourning the life of their family member over something like this, there is no excuse for rocks to equate to death. Just sending love and thoughts to their prayers to their family.
And they said that the video of the incident will be provided to the public in about 14 days. Okay. So they haven't released the video yet. Of course, there's a lot of people who are calling for transparency and calling for this video to be released immediately. And the police department they're saying give them 14 days.
And so hopefully when we get that video, it'll help shed a little bit more light on the situation. Yeah. The death of a 7-year-old child placed in foster care is under investigation. Louisville, Kentucky police say that Jason Terry's death is being ruled a homicide. 2 workers at the Brooklawn Children's Treatment Center have been fired. The child died in July of positional asphyxia. Now that means that his body was positioned left, unable to breathe. Now Jason he was under the care of workers when he died. Now the center cares for children who are recovering from the effects of child abuse.
And a Halloween declaration in North Carolina is now down after sparking controversy and complaints. The display was shared hundreds of times on Facebook. You're looking at it right here, soulmates. It shows what appears to be a fully dressed man with his hands tied behind his back, hanging from a tree outside of his home. The family says it was a Halloween declaration meant to look like a farmer, but residents say the display has racist undertones. Investigators say the family took down the display after realizing it had hurt the community, and they apologized. But police add there are no policies banning such displays on private property.
A former Kansas police detective is accused of preying on black women and girls for decades, is out of jail pending his trial. A federal justice released Roger Golubsky, saying that the cop was not as much of a threat as he was when he allegedly committed the assaults. But prosecutors protested, saying the cop may run. 69-year-old Golubsky was arrested and charged last week on 6 counts of civil rights violations. Prosecutors say as an officer, he sexually abused a black woman and then even more women, and that all happened decades ago. He was also charged with 5 counts of trying to kidnap those victims as well.
A Louisiana judge who exonerated a black man wrongfully convicted in a home invasion rape is angry. The judge in the case ordering Sullivan Walters immediately released earlier this month. Now, Walters spent 36 years in prison. The Innocence Project helped prove that evidence withheld by police kept Walters, who is now 53, locked up for years. The judge says Walters did not have to go to prison if evidence of his innocence had not been hidden from jurors. Now, according to a court motion, DNA evidence could have exonerated Walter at his trial and during the appeals process. But lawyers for Walters say neither the prosecution nor the lawyers at the time presented the evidence that could have kept him out of prison.